I know you graduated from Purdue University in 1976, and you started your career as a brand assistant for Pearl Concentrate, and you've remained with Procter & Gamble all these years, 31 years. Can you talk a little bit about how you first landed at P&G and why you've remained with them for all these years?
First, I have to say I never would have imagined that I would be here 31 years after leaving Purdue University. I joined the company in 1976 and was among the first group of women that were hired in the marketing area. So from that standpoint, I was a little bit of a novelty in the company. I was really grateful to have the opportunity to join P&G, although I never really intended to stay. When I got my job offer, I said, I really only plan to be here a couple of years, so if you want to take the offer back, I can understand that. I don't want to invest in a short timer. And they said, well, why don't you let us worry about that? And here I am 31 years later. I've had two careers at P&G, the first 13 years in the marketing area, and worked on a variety of brands. Bounty paper towels is my favorite brand in the company. And then in 1989, I had kind of a seminal moment where I really had to think about what I was going to do when I grew up. And I decided I really didn't want my boss's job. And when you grow up in marketing at P&G, you're genetically defective if you do not want to be a general manager. And I didn't want to be a general manager. And so my boss asked the obvious question, well, if you don't want my job, what is it that you do want to do? And honestly, not having reflected on that at any great depth, I said, well, I really love doing corporate work, and I really like working outside the company, and I love Procter & Gamble, so I want to stay, but I just want to do something different. And about 3 months later, my boss came back and said, we have this great opportunity for you to move to public affairs. And I thought, public affairs? Have I been derailed, or what is this all about? I mean, I knew that they did the company Christmas card, but beyond that, what is this all about? And then I went to my new boss's office to learn about the new job, and right away he said, now, you need to understand we're the garbage can of the company. People have problems, they drop them off here. I thought, oh, this is really aspirational. This is what I want to spend the rest of my career doing. But I really quickly learned that this was the perfect fit for me. That I loved what I did in marketing. The work that I had the opportunity to do over the past 18 years has just been a perfect fit, both in terms of communications, but also the opportunity to interact with company stakeholders, to be a face of the company, to develop the organization. It's been a dream job that I didn't even know existed. Even after I'd been with the company for 13 years, I didn't know that this work really existed. Now, why have I stayed with Procter & Gamble for 31 years? This is going to sound trite, but I really value the company's values. They're alive and they're really well aligned with mine. So every single day I go to work knowing that there's a degree of harmony between my values and my purpose in life and what the company does. So that's just a great environment to work in. The people I work with are people I'd be friends with if I didn't work with them. They're just people I really like. And every single day is interesting and fun and challenging. Not that every day is easy, but every day there's a new kind of challenge that, I just love. I can't imagine being anywhere else.
Did anything occur that made you feel challenged or uncomfortable in this new role in the company?
I'd have to say yes to that. When I joined the company in 1976, 8% of the managers were women. And the ranking woman was an associate marketing manager. So that's kind of a beginning mid-level manager. And today, nearly 40% of our managers are women. and we have them at the very highest level of the company. The recently named president of the company is a woman, Susan Arnold, and at every level, top to bottom, there are wonderful women. So I was the first, but now certainly not the only woman officer. When I was the first woman to live on our executive floor, and I think it took me a while to both feel entitled to be there and also to have the credibility to earn the trust and respect to get people to essentially take my counsel and do what I suggest that they do. One thing that helped a lot was I had a powerful male sponsor, and for most women in the organization, I think they still need a powerful male sponsor. Mine happened to be the CEO, which had some good points and some bad points. Certainly, he was an influential sponsor. At the same time, the fact that I was one of his mentees and one of his people, if you will, sometimes created some resentment with some of the folks, basically the men who had been around for a long time and sort of considered themselves a part of the leadership club, if you will. So I had to learn to use that newfound sponsorship and power judiciously, such that I both built allies, but at the same time was able to carry out the responsibilities that the CEO had asked me to carry out in terms of giving people advice and making sure that we stayed out of trouble, that there weren't any surprises, things like that. From my own standpoint, when I joined the company in 1976, I was grateful to have this opportunity. And I grew up being grateful. Now, that's not necessarily empowered. And so the transition that I had to make at that point was I had to feel really entitled to be among the leaders of the company and not a grateful little girl looking up to Dad saying, "Oh, thank you so much for this opportunity." Now, I really had to feel like I had a right to play at the table. And that took some maturing on my part. And I'll always be grateful to my husband, who is not only my partner in life, but my very best career coach, who sat me down and tried to help me understand the world of men, and that they didn't say they were sorry a lot. They didn't spend time explaining how they felt. They got in there, they did it. If there was conflict, they stood right up to it. I'll never forget a time that there was a gentleman who, in essence, was being sidestepped for advancement. And I think, in truth, he was a little embarrassed about it. So he came to me and said, "I don't want any coverage of this change in the newspaper." I tried to explain to him that this was not going to be under my control, that indeed it was news, that a new person was coming into the role, and I fully expected it to be reported. But if it made him feel better, we would pull the news release. Well, of course, the news got out immediately simply because it was news and it was announced internally. So the next day he came and he yelled at me. He was so angry that there had been coverage in the local paper. And I was devastated, and I went home and I shared my great regret that this had happened with my husband. And he said, "Did you tell him to just grow up?" Well, of course, this never occurred to me, that perhaps it wasn't my fault, that what was going to happen anyway happened. And to me, that was just a light bulb went off, that I don't have to take responsibility for everybody else's feelings, and I don't have to apologize, and I don't have to carry the guilt of the world. Everybody's responsible for themselves. That was that was a pretty big breakthrough for me in terms of feeling both entitled and feeling that I had a right to play at the table.
What are the most important issues, those enduring truths that you've discovered as you've come along and grown with Procter & Gamble?
I would say, first of all, it's really important to know yourself and to know your values and be very centered in knowing right from wrong. It's one of those page principles of tell the truth. Knowing what your truth is really important, because having that clear and centered personal set of values then enables one to give better counsel, clearer counsel, to not have to struggle with issues in your own mind. So I think that's really important. I think it's really important to have a mentality of generosity. There's room for everybody to be right. I've never met a person who believes strongly in something and articulates it believing that they're wrong. For some reason, they believe that their view, their approach has merit, even if others may not. So I think this mindset of generosity, of having room, an abundance mentality, there's lots of room for lots of different views, is really important to building trust and earning the right to be a part of the community. I believe in lift as you climb. I believe we each have a responsibility to do unto others as we have benefited from mentors and coaches and people who have helped lift us up. So I spend a lot of time with women's organizations and am the leader of our corporate women's leadership task force, because I really believe in that whole notion of lift as you climb.